What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Paul. I am live with the Comic Book Conservators. Episode 35. Can you believe it?
Hard to believe.
I'm in a great mood tonight. It's great to see you guys.
Good
It's
to
great to
see
see
you
the
too.
chat already.
Yeah, I see Shelby's here.
We got an exciting
Good
show.
Danner.
Yeah.
Hey,
That's my
everybody.
man Mike. He's always here. Mike, I got that ROM number 1 for you with the date code. That's why it disappeared from eBay, because it was me.
Nice.
There we go.
Thank you, Captain.
Occasionally I forget.
How's your week been?
Busy for me. I've been working, and I'm in Anchorage, Alaska today,
Oh boy.
and I'll leave here in a couple of hours. I'll head for Incheon, South Korea, and then the following day I'll be on to Shanghai.
Oh, all right.
So I'm busy. How about you,
Yeah.
Phil? How are you doing?
Doing good. Still like in a little bit of a daze. I just had like a really off, like chill day yesterday. It was my birthday, so I did as little as I could.
Happy
Yeah,
birthday.
I saw that. Happy birthday.
Thanks. Went out for just like a low key dinner at this nice Italian restaurant, and it was great.
I'm glad to hear it.
Otherwise, drowning in comics, as I always say.
Well, that's a good thing to be.
Yeah. This is a
On that
busy
note-
week.
Real quick, something fun.
Oh yeah.
What you got?
Let's
Let's
show everybody.
Oh, you know, it's the scene when Peter Parker gets bit by the spider.
Oh yeah. So a coverless AF-15.
There he is. As Spider-Man. Disassembled. Yes.
Oh, a disassembled.
Yes.
Disassembled.
I had to give the interior a nice press.
No disassemble. Only the people from our generation get that reference, Larry. I don't know if Phil did. I think he chuckled just to be polite.
Mm-hmm.
He admitted it.
Hanging out with the old dudes, you know.
Well, he's
Old
1
guys
year
rock,
older
though.
now.
Yeah, I am.
He's 1 year older now.
Yeah,
Jason-
honestly,
Jason
I
Adrift gets it.
I don't mind the age. It's more. I like 33 is a nice, free treat. Now 34, I'm like, yeah. But I digress. Really, I have nothing to complain about.
Well, Phil, when do you become old?
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, in my mind, it's when I'm not here anymore. So, until then.
There you go. That's easy.
Well, to a high school kid, you're ancient. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
yeah, I'm a fossil.
Well, before we get too far into it, let's do introductions. Phil, tell the people where they can find you.
Hi, I am Phil, located in Queens, New York City, like right on the Brooklyn-Queens line by like 2 blocks. I'm Phantom Restoration. You can find me on Instagram at Phantom Restoration, or as you see in my little name tag right here, www.phantomrestoration.com. Always, there's a submission form there if you want to send me an email. If I don't follow up there or in the DM, shoot me a follow-up. I'm just one man running a business, taking in a lot of comics, so I can get very busy.
Awesome. How about you, Captain Larry?
Well, you can find me mostly on Instagram at Flying Elk Comics, and I have flyingelkcomics.com. You can reach me there, and Facebook. And if you have any work that needs to be done, send it to Phil.
We get a lot of requests for help.
We do, actually.
I always advise people for free and try to link them up. I rarely take work on, but occasionally I do if I think it's something fun for the channel. But for the most part, I'll refer folks out to Phil or Kenny or a few others. This was a busy week, though. I was cleaning and pressing like a fiend, actually, but nothing that I created content for the channel, stuff that was a little more mundane than what we usually put on the channel. but there were big auctions this week. We're going to talk about one of them in our
Yes, there
our A
were.
segment here in just a
Mhm.
moment. But Phil, I don't know if you want to let people know about your auction adventures, but I'm going to fill people in on I scored 2 high-grade all-stars this week, and I'm just really working on putting together what I hope to be just the most legendary collection of all-star comics when I'm done. And so I scored 2 over, actually they were both over a 9.2. They were 9.2 or better. And
Incredible.
that's a good weekend for
Those are great
me.
books.
Yeah. But there's a lot of auctions going on right now. There was a Hakes this week. There was Heritage this weekend over the weekend. And then we have Comic Connect. Is it this week or the next? There's a Comic Connect coming up with some really nice books. They're already, Metropolis already advertising them. So yeah, it's been a busy week. Shelby's keeping me busy as well. We'll drop some news on that soon, but I'll just leave it at that for now. And let's do some shout outs before we start our A segment. Hugo Danner's here. Welcome, Mike, as always. Great to see you. I'm so happy to see everybody. I really love this hour and a half we have together every week. Thank you for joining us. AG is here. The professor's here. Hi, Peter. How you doing? Jason Adrift
Peter.
as usual. Aaron Conyers. Shelby says, happy birthday, Phil. And Johnny's here. And did I miss anybody? It looks like
so far, I think you got everybody.
All right. Well, we're going to start off as we usually do with our A segment. And it's a fun one. I'll be honest with you guys. I really wasn't sure what the hook was here because it's such a rare book. There are no comps.
Yeah.
And so
that happens with the stuff we do.
Yeah. Normally my hook is, here's the Conserved book. Here's the fair market value in Universal. Here's the fair market value in Conserved. Was it well bought? Was it well sold? Which would you rather? All those things that we do, those are fun. But in this instance, it's such a rare book. There are no comps. So we're going to be talking about Amazing Man Comics number 22. This is early Golden Age stuff, guys. And this is such a crazy cover. It's got CGC's. That's true. It's got CGC's classic cover designation, which is books with that designation just sell for multiples. They just do. This is not technically a key book. It's just a classic cover book that people want, and people just supply and demand. So we're going to talk about this, and I actually have not had a chance to talk to Phil about it other than a quick text. I actually want to pick his brain about some of the research that I came up with on this. So let's jump into it. So as I said, pre-war, this is cover dated May 1941. Interesting how much comic books were leading the culture and commentating on the culture at the time, right? We had not yet been dragged into World War II. In fact, there were a lot of isolationists in this country that wanted us to stay out of the war. And it was not a foregone conclusion that we were going to enter this war. And yet we have Captain America punching Hitler on the cover of Cap Comics 1. And we have this great cover here with mind-controlled radioactive guerrillas that the Nazis are deploying against the free world, I guess. I mean, wild, wild stuff. I love it. And no wonder it's so desirable. Centaur Publications, not a comic book company we talk about very often. Obviously, they did not survive the contraction after the post-war period in the Golden Age. But look at how rare this book is. 19 in the census total. Only 13 universal.
I like those low census.
if you talk about universal, if you owned, so there's only a single copy in 3, a single copy in 3.5, a single copy in 4.0. If you owned the single copy in 4.0, you could brag that there are only 2 known higher copies in the world, because there's only a single copy at 7.5 and 9.0. Unbelievable. This is one of the lowest median grades that we have ever seen for a golden age book. Ordinarily, if they survive, they tend to survive in better shape, for example, than Silver Age books do. So the median grades are typically more like 4.5 up to 6.5, frankly, for golden age books.
Mhm.
It's just such a rare book, such a desirable book. It's kind of bananas. And because it does have this classic cover that people love, it goes for big bucks. So years went by with not a single sale of this book. And then we got 3 sales this year, which is wild. 2 of them were in 2.0, and this is the first one. This one is, I believe, from April. It actually presents pretty well for a 2.0. It's does have tape all down the left spine. The cover is pretty significantly tanned on the back, but it presents pretty well on the front, right?
Sure does, yeah.
So let's have a look at the grader's notes. This one was graded in 2019. It says 2 extra staples added after manufacturing, tape on cover. This is pretty typical to just hold something together. This book was, again, I would say well loved just because it's basically falling apart, but at the same time, it presents pretty well. Colors are nice. We don't have any significant missing pieces on the cover here. And we don't have a lot of color breaking problems. Like, we don't see a lot of creasing. It just, I think, especially in these rare books and in these books where the cover is everything, if they present well, they're going to typically sell for a premium, right? Grader's notes say multiple extra staple, not manufacturing, multiple piece out cover, multiple tear back cover, tape spine, 2/3 split bottom of spine. So the spine split is what makes this a 2. Without the spine split, it's in the range of 3.5.
Yeah, 3.5. Yeah.
Yeah. And anybody want to guess what this hammered for in April of this year?
This is such a rare book. I know it's expensive in universal grade, but I would say probably in the neighborhood of about 15 to 20,000.
Phil, you got a guess? Do you happen to know? Anybody in the chat want to guess?
Somewhere in my brain, I do know the answer to this because the person who's been involved with a number of the public sales in the last few years is on Instagram and owns, I think, 3 complete copies and 1 coverless copy. And so I remember I was tracking the sales of these copies because I'm interested in one tentatively, not right now, but maybe if the price stays at least within this realm, which if I want to say this was about 20K, but I could be way off. I honestly, my memory's failing on me here, but it's somewhere in there.
You're way off.
Yeah.
Ooh,
yep.
Yeah.
I was almost gonna say
Way
it could
off.
be as high as 40, but yep.
Yeah.
Because I know the higher grade ones are selling upwards of close to $100,000.
So this particular one, again, it was the first one to come to market in years.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, just a few months after this one, someone brought another 2.0 to market, and it sold for about 30 grand. And I think partially this one got fought over because people said, we haven't seen one in years. We don't know when the next one will be here. And this one got, there was a little bit of a bidding war here. I didn't pull up the images or stats for the other 2.0 that sold for 30 grand. It actually presents very similarly. It also presents very well for a 2.0. And I do think it was just a little bit, when something's this rare, even bringing 2 to market in a year is a little bit market saturation.
Yeah.
And so I think the seller would have been probably better served holding it for another year or so. But regardless, 30 grand, 40 grand, it's a big in 2.0.
That's
Yeah.
a big book.
Yeah. You're talking between 15 and 20,000 per point on this book, right? In Universal. And again, who knows what the 7.0 or the 9.0 would bring? Big money.
Big.
So that's the context for the auction that happened this week. So this is the book that came to auction this week, and we were keeping an eye on it. It also presents really well. But the work that was done on it, I'm very interested to hear specifically from Phil, but others in the chat as well. So presents as well. The colors are not quite as bright. I think this is, if I look here, these are both photos from Heritage, presumably under very similar lighting conditions. And you see the one on the right, while it still looks vibrant, it's not quite as vibrant as the one on the left here. It's not quite as saturated in the reds.
Yeah, it's been cleaned.
Overall,
Yeah. I mean, it still presents amazing. And on its own, I don't think you would even notice it. But putting it side by side with this one, it is noticeable. Now, whether or not that's just a little bit of variability in the manufacture or in the aging of the book, or if it's because of cleaning, we'll see. But a lot of graders notes here to get through. So first I want to point out this one was graded in 2016 and it's had a lot of work done, as you can see by the plethora of graders notes. So it says conservation includes pieces added, tear seals, cover cleaned, cover reinforced, married back cover, and centerfold. So this has a back cover that it wasn't born with. It also has a centerfold it wasn't born with. And then it's had tear seals, cover clean, cover reinforced, but notably pieces added. So let's get into the detailed grader notes. Cover cleaning, high quality A1. Piece fill cover, archival material, high quality, up to 2 bindery chips, A1. Piece fill interior, archival material, high quality, centerfold, A1. Reinforcement to cover, archival material, high quality, A1. Tear seals to cover, archival material, high quality, A1. Large crease, full left of back cover, married back cover, married centerfold, multiple crease, full left of front cover, multiple crease, full right of back cover, multiple crease, top right of front cover, small multiple stain, full top of full cover. Of front cover, it says, I see the stain, I think, on the back, but they don't talk about that. So maybe it's an artifact of the imaging. And spine stress lines. You can see the spine stress lines. They're sort of barely visible. This one presents really well as well. The conservator here did a good job. Maybe it's just that the book is, see, I thought this was a dust shadow along the top of the back cover.
Looks like it.
Maybe it's just a little bit, the cover is just a little off register with the interior. And that's just a...
that's what that looks like. You can see the fanning of the interior pages really well.
Yeah.
At least that's what I
think if it had been a dust shadow, they would have mentioned it as detailed as those graders notes were. So again, that's a lot of work, and it's got multiple married pieces, right? The centerfold and the back cover.
Yeah, I'm just surprised at the conserved grade with that kind of work done.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but let's do hammer time first.
Okay.
What do we think this hammered for?
Larry, what do you think?
5.0 conserved in this book. I would say it's probably. I'm going to go really conservative on this one. I'm going to say 13 to 15.
Yeah, Phil already knows the answer.
Yep.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
I don't want to. I know very well. I spoke with several people about this book. I know the
Yeah.
consigner of the book. Yeah.
And I don't know if Jason's guess of 17K was for the last book or this book. I think it was for the last book. Ben Stewart, welcome, Ben, says 16K on this book. It's actually, I think, in the title to the video, to the YouTube video, but it is 15,600.
Oh, okay.
We thought this was a low price until we really dug into the conservation notes, and then I sort of feel like it's a fair price, but maybe it is still a bit low. We'll let's jump into it. So to your point, Larry, just a little bit of history.
Okay.
Prior to 2014, a book that got what we would call today conservation work was just considered restored by CGC. So they did not have a specific separate designation for conserved. In 2014, conserved became a subcategory of restored. And we got this label here, which shows the blue, I guess, kind of meaning it's a little better than restored, but still has the purple to really show people, to sort of be a beacon to potential buyers that this book has had work done. So there was no CGC conserved grade prior to 2014. And you still see these labels in the marketplace from time to time. Books that were slabbed between 2014 and 2016 have this conserved label, but they're purple, or they have this purple line. In 2016, they redefined restored, expanded the definition of it, gave a lot more clarity, gave a lot more guidance, and gave a kind of open source definition of restored and conserved. And that's when they established this conserved label, and they got rid of the purple. And I think books in this label have a bit less stigma. Interestingly, if you note here, conservation repairs, this is from the press release at the time of this change in 2016. You don't see piece fill under allowed repairs. Tear seals, spine split seals, reinforcement, piece reattachment. Some cover in interior cleaning, staples cleaned or replaced, some leaf casting, and deacidification. However, when you see materials used for conservation repairs, you have rice paper, wheat glue, vintage staples, archival tape. Piece fill was still allowed at this time in 2016 with traditional methods, infill. And at some point between then and 2016, and I don't know the exact time, and this is what I wanted Phil to weigh in on, but just put a pin in that. In 2022, CGC publishes the official guide, and we get a better look behind the curtain in Oz. And piece fill is no longer allowed in conserved grade. Piece fill is defined definitively as restoration, no matter what amount and no matter how well done, whether it's archival materials, professional or otherwise. Leaf casting is considered conservation, and they acknowledge that I'm reading directly here, quoting from Matt Nelson, leaf casting is the latest and most preferred method of piece fill, pioneered by conservators in Eastern Europe and the USSR during the mid-60s, actually technically in the mid-50s, and incorporated into comic book restoration in the early 2000s. So at some point between 2016 and 2022, and I couldn't find a press release or any other official notification from CGC on this, and I don't know the timing, but traditional piece fill became no longer allowed in conservation. So my question is, because this book appears to have, per the grader's notes, traditional piece fill, it was graded in 2016 when traditional piece fill was considered conservation. If this book was to be resubmitted today, wouldn't it be considered restored? And in that context, isn't this a 5.0 restored by today's standards? And
Well,
in
I'm
that
sorry.
context, what is the fair market value?
Well, the married cover is the one that's is the elephant in the room for me.
Married
Yeah.
covers are allowed under conservation as long as some other conservation work is done on the book. A married pages or cover will get you a conserved designation. So that's I think that's normal.
Yeah, Larry, are you aware of that?
No, I'm not.
That's
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't see that in the guide either.
it's
No,
in
so
there.
yeah, so I can answer the question too because I remember two specific books I was working on that I can pull up on my Instagram to be like, oh, this was the time. It was early 2021 when I remember because there was a real life 3 that I had worked on, and at the time I was doing standard tear seals, spine split seals, reinforcement with archival mending tissues. And
Right.
this real life 3, what I did was I just layered some color matched mending tissues at the top and bottom of the bindery pieces that were missing at the cover. And it was the first time I had a client say, hey, in their submission portal, they're like, this book's coming back with a purple label. What's going on? And I was like, being like, this is the first I'm hearing about this too. So I had to find out kind of the hard way that the rubric changed, and it was one of those things where there was no press release put out. There was no it was you kind of got to just know the rules of the game changed. So I was also working on a Detective Comics 38 that I was just about to ship out, and I had to stop and tell the client, hey, I'm gonna have to take off these small, tiny bindery piece fills at the top and bottom of the spine because they're gonna hit this with a restored label. So I did, but I wasn't able to maximize the technical grade on the book because I wasn't leaf casting then. So it
Yeah.
was a tough, and I thought there was already a few other books at CGC from other people too, so I had to kind of rework a few books. But that was, I mean, my headline comics 8 that I have fits the exact kind of description of this Amazing Man 22 aside from the married parts, and that is I added all those bindery pieces at the interior too, just to be um,
It's like a free shot on goal, right? You're already
yeah,
conserved. You may as well do it.
correct.
You may as well
Yeah,
make
yeah,
the book as
once
good
it's
as it could
conserved,
possibly
yeah.
be,
But
right?
I know I did the work on that book, so I know if I resub that book, it would come back today under today's standards with a restored label. This Amazing Man 22, part of the nuance of degrading too, as you guys both know who have subbed books, sometimes CGC who the graders are human and they're subject to human error or bias or whatever it is. I've had books that were supposed to be conserved come back A, B, or C level restored, just due to them not seeing the tear seal done. They were viewing it a different way. And upon
Mhm.
being re-reviewed, every instance it was conserved when I had it re-reviewed. So it was just the initial instance was wrong, and they re-corrected it
Sure.
as they should have. But it just goes to show the inconsistencies that can happen. So to my point, this Amazing Man 22, it's kind of hard to tell from the pictures. I looked on Heritage if those piece fills, which are small, if they were casted or not. If they were casted, this book would keep its conserved label. If they were not casted, it would get a restored label.
Yeah. I've seen. So graders' notes are what they are, right? It is normal for the grader's note to say leaf casted if it's leaf casted and piece fill if it's traditional piece fill. Though you are correct, it could be that this is somewhat sloppy. Given that the grader's
Possible.
notes are so detailed, though, I'd be surprised. I'd be very surprised if this was leaf casted.
I've had detailed grader's notes on books myself where something in
Still
there
be
was
wrong.
incorrect and it
Yeah,
had to be
yeah.
so I'm
It
just
could,
saying that from the perspective
Yeah,
of someone else
yeah.
on this. But yeah, who knows?
yeah. I've had to resubmit stuff that came back purple and got the conserved label after I
Yeah.
Yeah.
talked at them.
If somebody was viewing this book as restored and placing a restored fair market value on it, I think the price makes more sense. I think if you were very confident this was conserved today, It sells for more. I think the other thing is there are some purists who do not like the married pages,
That's what it is.
and that hurt the hammer price as well.
If this didn't have married parts and it was just conserved, I think this book easily would have gone for double. Easily. I don't even think
I agree with that.
I think, and I say that because on the CGC forums, I was reading, there were some people talking about this book. So I think some people thought that it was going to go for more, and there were quite a few people who, were like, "Oh, that fugly restored book," or whatever. Everyone has their, but the thing is, it's because partially these people don't understand some of the technical aspects of the conserved labels, even though they've been around for 10 years. They see that and they're like, that's just a fancy restored label. And it's because a lot of these people are purists, but then they see marriage on the label and they're like, this is just don't even go near this. And it's, other people see a book that's new old stock parts and just a little bit of structural work. It's not trying to deceive and be something it's not.
Right. Yeah.
See,
it's printed off the same printing
off.
press.
Yeah, the married covers, that's what threw me off is, how's this thing got a conserved label with a married cover? That's not in the acceptable notes that Paul just showed a little while ago. It's not even mentioned.
True, but it is in the guide. As a matter of fact, the Adventure Comic 61 that I won, that was a big mess, but it had all the bones there and it had some married leaves, and I bought it specifically because Phil and I talked about it beforehand and came up with a plan to collaborate on it and turn it into a conserved label. Mm-hmm. And we did that knowing that we would be able to get a conserved label with the married parts. And, I got that book very inexpensively for a first appearance of a Golden Age hero, a member of the JSA. So that, by the way, that's a long-term project, folks. We are still working on it. All right. So I thought this was super interesting. And thanks, Phil. I appreciate you letting us know it was early 2021.
I just wanted to highlight this because we were just right on topic, and it seemed like a good for some people that maybe haven't listened to previous.
Let's read it out loud. Let's read it out loud for the podcast listeners. David Clark says, when you conserve a book and send it to CGC, do you send along with it a transparency note of all you've done to the book?
Yes.
Larry?
In fact, I always do. In fact, I'll document it with photos. I spoke directly with Matt Nelson, and he said absolutely they read the notes. And we shared before in previous shows, I've had some of my notes come back with their own CGC grading notes on it. So, but straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, Matt Nelson said yes, they do read our notes.
I tend to, although if it's somebody else's book, I provide it to them, and if they sub it, it's up to them whether or not they want to put the note in. But I obviously I take detailed notes of what I do. I provide those either to CGC if it's my book, or to the owner of the book if it's somebody else's book, and then it's up to them to send it in. I know, I've discussed this point with Kenny Sanderson at some length, and he feels very strongly that you should send the notes in. I think in our industry, there are so few people working professionally, and reputation is so important. And I do think disclosure, if you're a seller, disclosure is very important. If you're a seller and you're not disclosing, it's borderline fraud, right? And so I think for the folks that work professionally, like Kenny and Phil, disclosure is everything. Now, I know, Phil, you have a different opinion with respect to CGC specifically on this, but of course, you would always disclose any work you did to any owner or prospective buyer or otherwise. But your experience with CGC gives you a little different take on this. And by the way, I've done it both ways, because after you and I spoke, I just did some experiments where I sent some in without notes. And I found that I essentially got the same results. So sending notes in is not required to get the correct grades or designations, but it may help. But fill the people in, Phil.
So I'm the rebel with or without a cause, depending on how you look at it. It's certainly not out of choice. I recommend sending them in, as you've heard from everyone else. However, in my own experience, not a single time that I've sent in notes has it comprehensively changed how they grade the book. So I am someone that really thinking about it in terms of how it's supposed to come back. I feel like the margin of error, which is there for everyone that submits books, I have a frequency of books that need to be re-reviewed, but at least consistently with conservation work, I really haven't had an issue with them coming back anything other than conserved labels or universal labels recently. The biggest issue really is just books for color touch removal that can kind of be the bane of my existence sometimes. And I wonder why I take them in, and I think it's crazy.
Me
and
too.
they end up holding up other jobs, but that's because I want to try to provide do all service. But at least for the purposes of what we're discussing here, I the more I think about it, the more I do like adopting a method of there are certain books that I've seen that have almost a letter of certificate, like I don't know what the word would be but it's a worksheet from Susan Giacconi, who did the restoration work on the book from the 90s. I've seen a handful of these at least. And that's
a form that you can kind of fast track your work, just check boxes and say what you did.
Not a single person that I've ever seen that had that with the book. It wasn't a detractor, it was only a benefit. And I think that the longer I've been doing this, the more I think just doing that for the small number of people that keep the books raw couldn't hurt, because then I can just include that as the sheet to send to CGC2 as a copy and have it for my own records too. It couldn't hurt. It certainly couldn't hurt. And the moral is, send in, if you work on books, the list of what you do. You really should.
Yeah. And thanks for joining, David. Thanks for the comment and question. I think we can do a few other shout outs here. Let's do this. And I think we had a few. Tim, I don't know if I mentioned Tim Marshall. Welcome, Tim. And John Scamardo.
I'll apologize to everybody. I'm nibbling on my dinner while we're doing the show because I have to go fly after this.
That's okay. Tex says, check GPA. There are other more recent Blue Label sales. I mentioned them, Tex. There's another one at 2.0 that sold a little over 20 grand. There's a 1.8 that also sold at 24,000. Those are the only 3 sales in the last 3 years. Hey, my man Dan joined us. Great to see you, Dan. Appreciate you, my man. Keep hitting them long boxes. Good luck finding those Mark Jewelers.
Nice.
It is always good to get confirmation, and it is great that Matt is available to us and is so gracious with his time. Yeah.
Yes, he is.
All right. Well, hope that was a good amuse-bouche, because I'm super excited to see this book in our next segment. This is the one that I'm going to try to trade or buy from Captain Larry when he gets it back. But speaking of, did you guys see what happened to turnaround times for CGC Vintage this week?
It's like half the company left, and we're going back to a year.
To the moon. 111 days. So for those of you, this is working days. So for those of you that don't, kind of grok what that means, there's really basically only 20 working days in a month, fewer in some months, like fewer than 20 in by, for example, in November and December. So 111 working days is 5.5 months. And if it happens to fall over November and December, even a little bit more than that. So I expect now not to get my books back from CGC until March sometime. The ones that were submitted, by the way, in the first week of August. But that said, I saw a bunch of outrage on this, and I gotta tell you, I don't really understand that.
You might be
You
safer.
put your books in and you wait. And if you don't like that, don't send them to CGC. I don't get the outrage. I really don't. Like,
Or fast track them.
yeah, fast track them if it bothers
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
They're as transparent as you could reasonably expect them to be. And listen, do you know what I think is going to happen with all the people bitching and moaning? I think they're just going to stop doing these sales. We had a great sale in the month of July for vintage submissions. We had a great sale in the month of October for modern submissions. Those create influx of submissions. They create backlogs. They create delays in getting your books back. If you don't like it, don't send it in during the sale or fast track it. But you know what? Bitching and moaning and making a big going into histrionics in social media, I predict the only thing that's you're not going to get your books any sooner. I guarantee that.
For sure.
And the only thing that's going to happen is we're not going to get these sales anymore. So just be patient, people. Have some take some delayed gratification. Now, when I thought my book was getting turned around in 30 business days, once 30 business days elapsed, I was checking it daily. But now that I realize I'm just in for the haul, I just don't check it daily. It doesn't, my life is not going to change materially, whether I get this book tomorrow, my submission batch tomorrow, or half a year from tomorrow. It just doesn't matter, people. So chill out.
Everyone like Dr.
That's my PSA for the day. But it was shocking because, when I submitted them, the turnaround time was like 30 days. And then I went to 40 and then 50, and then it jumped to 65, and then it jumped to 80 something. And yeah, just the end of the week, it went to 111.
Maybe for you, it won't be 111 and only be 57, so it takes some solace from the fact that it will be longer, but it won't be the peak. But actually, because it is kind of
who knows
based on when, but hey.
I have no idea. I'm not actually sure how they calculate that. I assume it's kind of books going out the door today, but hard to say, right?
This is coming. I have no idea. I'm just trying to make you feel better about it.
I'm over it. Like, one of the things was I did want to get those books back before we went to the Collector Summit. But once the Collector Summit was in the rearview mirror, at this point, it's like, meh. One of the books. Yeah, one of the books belongs to Starman. But again, it doesn't matter to him when he gets the book back. These are long-term PC items, or some of them are things I'm going to sell, but none of them are things that I'm going to sell in, the market's hot right now and it's going to be, it's going to collapse in 6 months. So yeah, chill out, people.
Just do a quick
and while we're chilling out, Jason, thank you so much. Next episode of the show comes to you ad-free, thanks to Jason. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Jason. Much appreciated.
And welcome to Vulu. First time I heard from Vulu tonight. So welcome to the show. Did it just pop up to 115, Ben? I thought it was 111, but I could be wrong. But regardless, that's half a year. So there it is.
Yeah,
so that's 6 months, right? My first submission to CGC was actually during the pandemic, and it took over a year. It took literally over 1 calendar year, total turnaround time, door to door. And that was just modern.
Yeah.
So, it is what it is, people. Chill out.
High value and turnaround are, high value and unlimited value are 10 days and 4 days respectively. So
those haven't changed. Yeah.
You're sending books over $1,000, turnaround times are still relatively reasonable.
And I'm going to be I'm starting to collect books for another submission here, and I'll put together some pointers when I do that for that submission. But, I do have one other thing for me that, initially created a little bit of anxiety, but again, whatever, is I have a bunch of open-ended video series on the channel, right? Where I did a crack or an initial assessment. I did a full conservation or a clean and a press. I had specific goals. A couple of them were, can we make the highest graded copy of this book in the world, right? Can we top the census? And I thought I was going to be able to wrap all those series up relatively quickly, right? Now people are waiting over half a year for the results. And even when I get the results, it's going to take me some time to put the wrap up videos together. So they're going to be, well over half a year, because I also did not finish all those projects the day I submitted the books, right? So some of those projects, the sort of conclusion, final chapter is going to be a year after I started the project, or even a year after I posted the penultimate video. But again, it is what it is. People will either enjoy that content or they won't. And, raging at the machine isn't going to change it. So anyway, let's get into this book.
Sure.
Yeah, Larry, I want to hear you talk about this action comic.
Awesome cover. Love this classic cover.
Yeah, I saw it and I go, oh, I got to have that cover, because that is such an iconic cover for this book, and it was in such bad shape. The 1.0, you already know that the cover is in pieces.
Yeah.
So I looked at this and I go, man, I'm gonna take a crack at this. It called to me.
Yeah.
So I did pick it up. It was not cheap by any means, but like I like to say, it had meat left on the bones.
Mm-hmm.
And this was bone. This was bones.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, I know I keep going back to it, but this cover is featured in Richard O'Brien's The Golden Age of Comic Books. And so this is a cover. This is a cover that I've looked at thousands of times, starting from when I was about 10 years old, and got a tattered copy of that book and was introduced to the Golden Age. So this is just has a special nostalgia place for me, even though obviously it was published way before I was born. Are you ready for the next slide, Captain?
Yeah, let's go ahead and roll the next slide. All right. It's a Jerry Siegel, Gardner Fox stories. A couple of origins in there. But in this particular book, we could look at the grader's notes here. Spine of cover completely split, cover detached. That's just something I saw. I said, I can fix that.
Yep.
Moderate spine stress lines to the cover, moderate tears to the cover, and a piece out of the bottom front cover, which is that front corner we'll take a closer look at here in a minute.
Upper left right too, corner. Although they don't note it, right?
Yeah, they don't. They did not note it in the upper left, but that's your typical top corner. Cover is worn away, gone.
Yeah.
We'll see that in some of the pictures here. It's a 1.0. It was graded in 2019. So it's. I went after it because I just love the cover.
Yeah. I mean, I continue to say this, but it continues to be true. You have a great eye for picking projects, and I think this is a great one.
I've got a couple of them you're going to be coming up that you'll be happy at.
I got a sneak peek of one of them. If we publish this book in 2024, would Mr. America and would Fat Man's name be Fat Man?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think they would come out with somebody something more politically correct.
Vertically challenged, massive man.
Massive man, I like that.
The blob. All right, so here's the history. There's 47 graded copies because it is a popular cover, but not many sales. Only 2 in 2024. The 7.0 sold for $44.64, and 1.0 sold for $8.54, and that's the one we're talking about right now. That was what I paid for it. Mm-hmm. And a 9.4 sold for over $50,000 in 2021.
Wow!
So
was that like the Mile High or something?
No, it was just a regular.
Just a 9.4.
It was just a 9.4. There was no pedigree to it. and it was I was quite surprised, but it is a cool cover, like we said.
It is, yeah. Classic.
So yeah, so it is. It was interesting. Let's go next slide and take a look at this. So this is a once I got everything apart and I laid it out, looked at the pieces and how we're coming up with the action plan. Really is to deacidify, give it a blue light treatment, and leaf cast it back together on the vacuum table, which is exactly what we did. So I was interesting to see how well the colors would come out after a good cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
And I was pleasantly surprised with that.
Well, again, the pieces that are missing are, not major pieces of the artwork, right? Like it still has good bones, as you said.
Yes.
And speaking of bones, Jason has a suggestion for what Fat Man might
Big
be called
boned
today.
Yeah.
Mike has another movie reference here. Get in my belly. It's just lovely. One of the things I like about this era of action still was DC's lead book, and they had their A-team working on it. It's an anthology, as we've talked about before. Zatara is still here. Superman obviously is the lead character, but they're in this transition where super blocky, sort of, thick-waisted Superman, which we see in the upper left in the trade dress, is starting to transition to more bodybuilder Superman, but not all the way to bodybuilder Superman with like a with the hairdos from the 90s.
Yep.
Where mullet Superman,
the mullets and the I really, there's a reason why it's called the Golden Age, and Action 52 epitomizes it. So,
yep. Well, these are all wartime books.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
and the stories.
So soldiers are reading these.
And the stories are high quality. The editing is high quality. The art is high quality. These are people that were trained as illustrationists really before photography was affordable. They were just masters of their craft. So, I mean, we need to preserve these books.
Oh, yeah. No,
so I'm looking forward to the work you did on this one. Wow, look at the tanning.
Yeah, lots of heavy tanning on here. There are, we have that one little piece right there that once everything was separated, you just looked at it and the piece fell off. So
yeah, I mean, when I see
it was brittle.
When I see pieces like that, it strikes me as this is probably a brittle book.
Yeah, it was a brittle book. You can see now. You can really prominently see the sections of the corner and that top corner that are missing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I went after this and gave it a good cleaning, and to the leaf casting table it went. So laid everything all out. Tried my best to find a color that would match.
Mm-hmm.
And after it dried and it turned over, I wasn't trying to match the interior cover, obviously.
Yeah, you're trying to match the exterior.
I'm trying to match the exterior.
I don't think you could have done much better, in my opinion, here, because again, you can't match both sides unless you do a double-sided cast, which you weren't doing here.
I was not doing there. It was just I didn't want to get it any more wet than it was already. Done.
And you have as good a match as you could possibly imagine on the front cover, which should have been your target. I completely agree with your decision and your execution here. It's lovely.
Me too.
Yeah, the writing you see up in the large A of action, it was a date mark that somebody put in by pencil, and I'm very leery because I made the accident of removing a pedigree mark once before. Luckily, I had the paperwork to document it, and I didn't lose the designation when I went to CGC. So now I'm a little bit gun shy when I see things like this. I went through all the pedigree documentation. I found a couple of similar things, and then I consulted with some other people. Actually, it was one night. Yeah, I was on the phone with Kenny Sanderson. And he says, "Nope, that's just a date mark,"
Yeah.
and so I took it off for the final thing, and
Nice.
it came. It really popped. So with this, we filled in all the missing pieces. The corners, the center section, the bottom right corner of the front cover, and you can move on to the next slide.
Looks beautiful.
That's the corner.
There it is after trimming.
After trimming, it was all squared up. Now, for those at home, when this gets graded, this is really what a piece fill is about, and it'll come back with that designation. So it's got the right texture, it's got the right thickness, leaf casted really nicely right into the cover.
Beautiful. We can see the whitening job you did as well in this white field that the flag that Old Glory is flying in.
It came out good.
And even the trim looks beautiful, nice and sharp.
Yep.
What was your pulp recipe here, Captain?
My gravitation to pretty much all of my pulp recipes is about 10% Abaca, and then I start looking at colors, and I'm trying to remember what this one was. I don't remember off the top of my head. What is the one you used, Dr. Paul?
Toned tan?
No, there was something else that you also.
Oh, an actual fiber.
Flax, that's it.
A little bit of flax. Yeah, a little bit of flax is a really good toner.
Yeah, I used a little bit of flax in there, and I think
you get really good hydrogen bonding with it too, and the fiber length is a good fiber length. Yeah, a little bit of flax is a good addition to the pulp.
Yeah, flax worked out really well. It blended terribly, but it just takes time. And I'm not very, very patient, as you guys know. I want to get things done now.
A good way to amend that is to beat the fibers.
I have started doing that.
Pressure cook and then strain and then beat the fibers. And they swell up and they flow a lot better. And I think the professor's doing that now as well.
Yeah, so my method is exactly that. I put it in the pressure cooker for about 90 minutes. That's usually about 250 degrees. And then when it comes out, I drain away most of the water that I can. And then I fold it inside of a piece of, not paper towel, but what was I using? I was using Hollytex, actually, Hollytex. And I got one of those great big metal Walmart meat tenderizing hammers. Use the flat part, people. And just beat the poo out of it. And just keep folding it over on itself, just like you would bread or whatever. Just pound it flat, fold it over. And what you're really doing is pounding the fibers out lengthwise and just keep it up. Eventually the thing's going to start drying out as you do this because all the water's coming out. You can add
it's
more
messy.
Water.
You're hydraulically you're hydraulically pressing the water out with each slam of the hammer, so it makes a big mess as well. Do it outside.
I have not mastered how long or how much I should beat it. I just keep going till I get tired of doing it and then come back and do it some more. And
that sounds like a good recipe to me.
I mean, it's really is to say how when are you done pounding on this stuff? And my answer to that would be you put it in a syringe to apply it, and it still comes out in big chunks. You have not pounded it enough.
Yeah.
So I've been there too. So, but yeah, this one I believe that based on the color is probably mostly on the side of Abaca.
Because the flax is quite dark. Even bleached flax is kind of dark. So Jason says, "What's flax?"
Unbleached Abaca.
Yeah, I use the unbleached Abaca, but flax is one of the original old world fibers used to produce paper. It's got a high concentration of cellulose and hemicellulose, very little lignin. It's a traditional fiber for paper making. Paper made from flax is exceedingly stable. This is the kind of paper made in the 1100s, 12, 1400s, 1600s through the 1800s. And so, and Ben points out linen too. So cotton, flax, and linen are the three primary historic fibers for paper in the Western tradition in the Old World.
So,
All right, beautiful. And you know what? I actually like how the color here is not perfect. And that's what newsprint looks like, people, right? So that's normal. That's a good job. That's when you're doing it correct.
These books were never bone white.
Well, again, but not only were they not white, Larry, but I haven't. That's true. But my point here is, if I look at this, I see a couple of really dark flecks. I see a couple of light flecks. I see some variegation here in the paper, and that is A, not only normal, but B, that's what newsprint looks like. And to me, that's what a good leaf cast looks like on a comic book. If the whole thing was uniformly one perfect color, to me, that's not my goal. That's not what I'm shooting for, because that's not what the original material looks like. Also, not for nothing, but when you variegate it like this, it plays a little visual trick with your eye, and it makes it blend better with the different colors around it, because we know surviving paper is different from top to bottom, left to right, center to edge, etc. And this creates a more pleasing look when you have this variegated leaf cast up against the surviving paper. So hats off, brother.
Well, one thing I want to point out in this picture as well, and you don't notice it until I tell you about it. If you look where the bond is to the original piece, it's a little bit darker. I did take a fine brush and I painted methyl cellulose.
I saw it.
And my point to this is when you do this, methyl cellulose dries a shade darker. And I found this by accident when I used a lot of methyl cellulose to take care of it in another book in its previous life. But I just wanted to point that out. So I did that to protect the bond.
You did it prophylactically because you thought it'd be a good thing to do, or because you actually had the bond coming apart, or were concerned it was coming apart?
I did have a part on the spine that popped.
Sure.
And so I went back and repaired that. So I said, well, if I'm going to do that, might as well cover all the edges just in case nothing pops on. And this corner, because it's where its location is, and I don't know who's going to handle it at CGC. But yeah, could it snap off? Sure. Anything's possible. Because this is really a butt splice. When you're just putting everything together. It does have some overlap on the back side of the cover just for strength, but it's really about the presentation.
Larry, did you? Sorry. Did you apply the methyl cellulose from this side here, from the obverse, or from the reverse?
From this side.
And so
I think I would have done it from the other side.
I was worried about because of the thickness of it, because it matched the cover, and these covers are thick, that if it were to get bent or anything like that, it would flex to the point where it would pop on the edge. So I look at it from a construction.
You didn't size this leaf casted section, right? So it's unsized paper.
This was not sized. That's correct.
I think your methyl cellulose would have wicked in there really well. I would.
Yeah. So
from the backside.
If this was me,
not to criticize your work, just that's what I would have done.
Larry,
Sorry, Phil.
when I was doing traditional piece fills or even leaf casting like something like this, I would say so. When you were saying if you look up to where that casted piece is touching the black ink on the front cover, right? You said it's a little
Mhm.
darker there because you put a little methyl cellulose like
Yeah.
against that seam, right? So if it was
Yeah.
me, I would have taken a little bit on my brush, like dipped it in, um, pulled it out on the side of the container to rub all the excess off. So it's just this. There's some on there, but there's enough, and you just keep doing that. And I just would have covered that whole corner. And
Oh,
then
I was wondering, you would have done the whole corner.
twofold. It would have given sizing protection to the paper. So like if dirt got on there, it's not going to be absorbed easily. So that methyl cellulose is adding protection, and then it's also going to hide that what you did. So you're not, and like you can only see it because you know to look for it to see how it's a slightly darker hue because the methyl cellulose when it dries, like you said, it's not nothing, and because it's transparent, it leaves like it's like a negative addition, so it's slightly darker because of that. I deal with that when I do the transparencies on the art when your paper
Okay, well,
matching and your so
that's good to know because it hasn't been submitted yet, so I still
Yeah,
have it
that's a good point.
sitting at home. So I can go back after the fact and do exactly that.
yeah.
Wonderbar.
Okay.
Just to say it for the record, I'll do this even on a universal book that I have where there's a corner where there's multiple creases and you know it's starting to get kind of weak. I'll hit usually just along the crease, as long as I don't get that slightly darker hue like you had. Otherwise, I'll try to feather in methylcellulose, but it's a great additive to help strengthen the paper. And because we know how it dries and it blends in with the paper naturally, it doesn't show up under like UV light or anything. It's not ever going to trigger universal grade. It's just kind of an extra thing. If you have that piece that's almost coming off, but the paper's just like there's a lap tear just enough to kind of hit some methylcellulose there. It's always, to me, it's almost safer to do it than to not do it.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that again. Yeah, I
Oh,
think
this looks great, Larry. Great job.
yeah.
Looks phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you.
Vulu says, is Remay Polytext required for the leaf casting process, or could you still do it with the cheap interfacing? You can do it with the cheap interfacing, but I don't know if you want to. Here's why. The cheap interfacing does not have nearly as colandered a surface as the Polytext. And so you're going to have a leaf cast with more nap to it. And then you're going to have to do something to it to reduce the nap, the texture, to get the texture to match the rest of the newsprint. So I think while you could do it technically, it's ill-advised, and you're going to want to go with the smoothest Polytext you can find for leaf casting. Newsprint, so just a little bit about paper. Newsprint is obviously made from pulp. It's ground wood with chemical treatments, very acidic and high lignin content. It is not typically sized. That is, the interior pages are not sized of your comic book. It is, however, colandered. What is colandering? Colandering is a process by which the surface is burnished smooth through friction and pressure, and that's why the surface of the newsprint feels quite smooth, even though it hasn't been sized, and doesn't have any additives or coatings on it. So we're dealing with a cover here, and we could make the distinction between the paper between the, covers and interiors for comic books. It is obviously a different paper. I think it's, anybody that's seen one knows that. Covers are sized and coated. They're also more highly colandered. And you could make an argument that you should be leaf casting covers with slightly different pulp recipes, with slightly different finishes than you do interior pages. CGC does not make a distinction, to my knowledge, and most of the conservation community is not making a distinction, at least in public, with respect to covers versus interiors, other than the color matching is different because the covers tend to be a brighter color. but it would be technically correct to size the cast on the cover, and it would be technically correct to have a smoother finish on the paper, because the paper has been, well, in addition to being sized and coated and highly calendared, it's also got additives. So covers typically have an additive called kaolin, which is essentially a white clay, but there are other additives as well. These basically fill in the gaps between the cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin fibers, and provide an ultra smooth surface, which then takes calendaring better than just the paper pulp without the additive would take. So how much of that are we trying to recreate? Well, again, the bar is relatively low. It's already, there aren't that many people leaf casting. So there's already quite a barrier to entry just to leaf cast a cover by traditional, paper infill. I call it traditional now because it wasn't, it's not as old as traditional infill we were talking about before, but it was developed in the 50s, and, it's now, there's quite a bit of consolidation and I think consensus in the conservation literature what leaf casting is or ought to be. We in the comic community have not yet made a big distinction, again, at least publicly. It may be that some people like Kenny Sanderson is using dramatically different pulp recipes for his covers versus his interior pages. If that's true, I'm not aware of it. Nobody that is publicly announcing recipes and methods is making a big distinction yet. So all that said, I know, the professor and I have been discussing this for some time. I've been discussing it with my co-host here for some time, and we've been experimenting. The professor's published some casted pages with a sizing. And of course, we just discussed sizing this with methyl cellulose. I'm not sure that the other additives like kaolin are necessarily a good idea for a cast here, but maybe at some point in the future, we'll get to being that sophisticated where we're reproducing those additives as well. All that to say, you had a simple question. Can you use cheap interfacing? You can, but I think you'll find it not worth your trouble. Go ahead and buy the high quality Hollytex, one of the grades that's highly calendared, and it'll actually be an economy because it'll save you so much time and energy. It'll pay for itself, and you can reuse that stuff. If you're gentle and if you only used it for leaf casting, you can reuse it almost indefinitely. You can get a lot of mileage out of it. One of the things I found is towels are more abrasive than you realize. And when you're trying to dry something off, you drag a paper towel across Hollytex, it'll destroy the Hollytex. But if you dab and you only blot, your Hollytex lasts almost forever. That's been my experience. So
same.
Oh boy. Sorry to get into that. Sometimes I want all of the work that I did researching this to pay off sometimes. So how much leaf casting do you do on a pro level fill? Just curious how often it's requested.
So publicly, I don't have it offered on my website, but privately, I do some leaf casting. This is a leaf caster, official leaf caster machine. I also have a suction table that I'm going to be getting in the next 4 weeks, because I've been doing some full submersion, but having a suction table is nice. And while this doubles as having a suction table, its primary use is full submersion castings. Come January, I'm going to be officially offering it, but I've just been so busy with high-end pressing, restoration, removal, and standard conservation that it hasn't been something I needed to focus on as much. That said, I have a queue already of books being casted, so it's just around the corner.
Awesome. Larry, I think, is basically just looking for leaf casting projects now, yeah?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. I'm not in a business like Phil is, and so these are all my personal, quests and grails to just improve myself. But I added this slide because there's questions about detection, things like that. This is very much a uh, exaggeration, so to speak, but the cover colors look normal. But because of the fibers that are used in the actual pulp, some of them reflect under an ultraviolet light, and I like this picture. I took tape off of the book, and then I casted it from the backside, and this is what it would look like under ultraviolet. And if you're doing this sort of work, if you don't have an ultraviolet light, I suggest getting one. If
Absolutely.
anything, just for restoration, color touch shows up very prominently. All three of
Glue,
us,
PVA glue.
I have multiple lights that I can highly recommend. I have one. The one I use particularly on this book is fairly extremely powerful light. It actually will run a battery. It's rechargeable. Runs a battery dead in about an hour. It gets really hot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a lot of
really powerful LEDs available now.
Yeah, basically it's a lot of powerful radiation coming off of it. That's why it heats up so quickly.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
this is what you can see. So
looks
but
great.
yes.
It looks great even like this.
Yeah.
One of the questions I had when I saw this image, Larry, is do you have some tears at the bottom that you decided to just seal with traditional Japanese paper, tear seals? Or what am I seeing along the bottom edge there?
I think if I did tear seals on the bottom edge, yes, I would use Japanese paper, and they would be just vertical pieces,
Yeah.
small pieces to hide
That's
the
what it looks like.
not
Oh, cutting out a little bit.
Yeah, I lost Larry for a second, but I prefer this approach. I think. Sorry, we lost you for just a second, Larry, but you were saying not.
Yeah,
I think you were saying
I'm
not
on
all along the
hotel
bottom.
Wi-Fi. Yeah, I'm on a hotel Wi-Fi, so it's probably about time for it to restart my 24-hour deal. But yeah, smaller is better. Just cover what you need to where it's strong enough to hold the bond. Now, looking at this picture, I see a vertical tear right there. I don't think I repaired it yet
Right.
in this picture, or
That
I
was
didn't
my
repair
sense.
it at all and left it because it was so small.
Okay.
Larry, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Did you dry clean the book before you wash it? Or do you just go straight to the wash and have that removed?
I go straight to the wash to get the dirt off, and then once it's dry, I'll dry clean it. So whatever doesn't wash off, then I'll clean.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Just to comment on this, using both Japanese paper and leaf casting on a book, I think this approach is the correct way, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the professor did this recently as well too. When you have just basically a tear that's just a tiny lap tear like this, right? There's no actual material missing. The fibers have just been torn. You don't want to leaf cast this. That's not the correct way to correct this. Just use Japanese paper. Use it alongside your leaf casting as another tool. Each job requires a different tool, a different material, and that's the correct way to do these tear seals is with Japanese paper. That said, I'm also not a fan of embedding Japanese paper inside the leaf cast in the idea that it would reinforce the leaf cast.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't think that's the correct material for that tool. And when I say that, of course, I'm not calling anybody out. And look, if it's your book, do what you want. It's not something that's done among professional conservators. It's not something that's discussed in the conservation literature. And that said, for every rule that we have, there's a good reason why you could probably come up with a corner case why it ought to be broken. So I'm also not saying anybody that does it is a fool or that I would never do it. I'm just bringing it up as I don't think it's best practice. I don't think it should be the sort of regular approach to lay down, Japanese paper inside your leaf cast as a way to reinforce it.
Well, they're trying to make this like putting rebar into cement.
Yeah.
No, I
see,
understand
for me,
the purpose of it. I just,
yeah.
from my
When
perspective, leaf casting has been demonstrated to be at least as strong when done correctly as the original paper here. So if your leaf cast isn't strong enough, work on your method and get there,
Yeah,
rather
I
than
agree with
reinforcing it that way is just my approach.
In this particular book, because so much of the spine was missing, it was leaf casted together. And once that was done, I did reinforce it from the interior with Japanese paper because it is a flex point. And,
You don't say.
Yeah. And
exactly as the professor just commented.
Yeah. Exactly right there. So.
Yep. Yeah. Unbothered Kitty checked in. That's friend of the channel, Cat. Thanks for saying hi. Appreciate you. And Jason Adrift has a really important question. I think you need the actual decoder ring, and I don't know if you have that in your collection, Captain.
Remember,
no, I do not have the decoder.
Anybody that has the decoder ring, please help us out. Let us know next episode. Oh, at least one person does. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. Well, I think you have one more slide for us.
Last slide. We're getting close to the last slide.
I love those kind of slides. So great.
So now that we've done messing and talking about the cover, let's talk about the interior pages. So pretty much all of the pages were in this condition. We had about a third of the page right to the staple was split, and a lot of them after the deacidification were in this condition. Because basically you can't really see it because it's the book spine was folded over. There was wear points. In this particular case, it was a very brittle book, and the pages had thinned significantly. So with this was another one that I did do a leaf cast fill with the thinner areas, and then this is the first wrap. So you're looking at basically the first page of the book after the cover wrap, and this is one of those pages that I will always usually reinforce the staple area with Japanese paper, along with the inner wrap, the final wrap. So when the staples go through the holes, they have a good strong bond to hold the rest of the book back together.
Mm-hmm.
So this did get a full proper fill. So
beautiful.
I think I did the corners as well.
Okay, let's talk about the house ad. You get 2 dimes for your allowance. You already bought Action 52. What
Find
are
2 copies
you?
of Mutt and Jeff.
Okay, I was just about to say Mutt and Jeff is the only one that is off the table.
No, but
Jeff, that's not for me.
You can.
Okay,
more Mutt and Jeff for me.
Batman 12. I don't know.
I take the Batman 12.
If that's a key issue. Leading Comics 3. All Flash.
All-Star and Batman.
Is it All Flash 4? Green Lantern 6? Am I?
To me, the Batman is a key because it's a world. It's World War II. He's in the Jeep.
Yeah,
I think that's a key book for me, and I would go
only
for
a handful of them. Handful of Batman World War II covers too. So pretty
true.
Sweet.
I think there's no need for speculation what Dr. Paul's taken.
Definitely not the All-Star. No,
I
you
know
get
it's
two
the
mugs.
All-Star.
Yes,
It's
I know
always
it.
Actually, this is one of the best. All Star doesn't have a lot of great wartime covers. There is uh, a Hitler Mussolini Hirohoto cover, but they're kind of small and it's not really the
Yeah.
focal point of the cover. And then you have two super patriotic covers, and this is one of them. So this is actually a book that is one of my favorite covers from the run. It's also a very early Wonder Woman cover. So that would be an easy one for me. All right. We got one more slide.
I think so. Should be the last one. And yeah, here we are. This is everything put back together. The interior looks nice. The staples are tight. And really, it's done and ready to go. Except now I'm going to go back and repaint that corner with cellulose so everything matches, and then I'll send it off.
And sub it. So remind us about the staples here. I feel like I watched your video and you weren't sure if they were original, or am I misremembering
Yeah,
that?
no, you are remembering that correctly. The staples were too bright, and I could tell from the pages, the interior wrap, they'd been manipulated once before, just by
Okay.
Ooh,
the
naughty,
tearing.
naughty.
Naughty. Somebody has been there playing with it at one time. So I do have a collection of 1940s and 50s staples that I've harvested over time. So I went to that and replaced those with.
So they're replaced with vintage period correct staples.
Period correct staples, which is allowed under the conserved grade. So.
Now, for your submission, you have to kind of estimate the fair market value here. Where do you think this book is right now? What's your plan for the submission?
More than 400, less than 1,000. So high value.
In the high value.
It doesn't, to me, it doesn't make the cut for the unlimited value. I just don't think it's.
And even if it does,
it won't be worth 1,000.
And even if it does, why throw CGC the extra money? Let them tell you that it does.
They can figure it out, and they won't do anything on that sense.
No,
I estimate this book grade wise. I'm fairly conservative, a 3 to a 3.5.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So at those numbers, then you apply that compared to Universal, whack the price in half, and you're under 1,000, but over 400.
Okay.
Did I make money on the book? Most likely not.
No, you did this to save, and good on you. You saved this book, Larry. So
I saved the book. That's how
I'm going to be at 3.5 plus or minus a half point. I think this could be a stretch to a 4.
Yeah.
But I think it's a 3.5.
Yeah.
I'll go with 3 to 3.5. So
yeah.
Although I've seen some books. There's a book that Kenny casted where the whole bottom left corner of the front cover was gone. It was a big area, and I think that book, I want to say, got a 3 or a 3.5. So, but if it was otherwise very nice, I can understand. I guess
I just think it's in that realm. No, I'm not saying I think it's a 4. I'm saying I think it's a 3.5. But I'm saying my range is just a half grade above.
Yeah, no, I see where you're coming from.
I think the rational range for this is 3 to 4. If you read the old
I agree
Overstreet guide on how much of a cover is allowed to be missing and still be a 4, this is in that realm. And it's, by the way, been leaf casted, so you're not actually supposed to be dinged for that. You're only missing the art, not the paper. So I think it's rational to say this could achieve a 4. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it will. And I grade the same way you do, Larry, on my own books. But when I evaluate other people's books, I try to be more exacting, whereas I'll discount my own just because I always would rather be surprised.
Yeah, I'd rather be pleasantly surprised than disappointed when it comes back. Now, when I get back off this trip, I'll be sending it off, and this will fall under the 10 working day rule. So hopefully
we should get
we're getting into the Christmas season, so it comes back at the beginning of January, then I won't be surprised. But I'm not going to put any hopes on getting it back in December. But if it does,
I mean,
we'll reevaluate everything. It'll be in with the other comics we've looked at in the past couple of weeks on the show.
yeah.
So
Awesome project.
we'll have some
Really
stuff to
looking
talk
forward to
about.
seeing the outcome here.
Yeah.
Wanna just say I didn't attempt to pronounce your first name the last time, but I'm gonna say Gerald, but maybe I'm just gonna go with Gerald.
I think Gerald.
Thank you for that, but really this is what I wanted to show. Just starting my pressing journey. Will be buying my first press in 3 weeks. Awesome.
Good for you.
Keep us informed how it goes.
Yeah.
And that's actually probably a great segue to reminding everybody that if this is not enough conservation for you for a week and you just need more conservation content, come on over to the comic book conservation community on Facebook. We have a very active community, including some classically trained conservators in the house, and super collaborative, lots of fun, a lot of really helpful people, a lot of encouragement. And we encourage you to come join us there if you want to just keep the chat going and keep the conversation going. And so hopefully we'll see you over there, Gerald. If you're not already there, certainly we have enough members now that it's difficult for me to keep track of everybody. Jason had one more question. Let's get this up. It says, will reversible color touch ever be considered conservation rather than restoration?
Probably not.
Probably not, because I think it's too difficult for CGC
not.
to judge. It's just impractical for them.
Yep.
You'd have to know what the color touch is and whether or not it is actually reversible.
Right.
Professional color touch is as good as it probably would ever be now, too.
Yep. And thank you for the kind words. This show goes by fast.
Yeah, it does.
I hope people don't feel like it drags, especially when I'm lecturing. Well, thanks again for joining us from the road, Larry, and for showing us
thanks, Larry.
project.
Appreciate your time.
Welcome.
It looks amazing, brother.
Yep.
Congratulations on that one. Looking forward to the outcome.
Me too.
And thanks to everybody for joining us, especially Jason, who left us a super chat. Appreciate you, my man.
Yep.
Next episode's on Jason, everybody.
Thank you, Jason.
I hope everybody has a great week. I got a lot to do this week. I'm pretty excited about the week coming up as much as I was the previous. And until next time, take care of one another.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in live.